What would you do if, in the middle of a festival full of music, color, and joy, masked performers suddenly turned the celebration into a nightmare? And their target was none other than Keanu Reeves. This isn't just a story about danger. It's about betrayal, courage, and how even the most carefully crafted lies can collapse when the truth finds a voice. Tonight, I'm going to take you inside a night that should have been filled with laughter, but instead became a brutal trap for Keanu. A night where painted masks hid fists and knives, where confetti mixed with blood, and where an ordinary boy with nothing but a phone in his hand proved that even the smallest voice can shatter the darkest conspiracy. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you questioning the masks people wear in your own life. It will reveal how shadows don't always approach openly. They smile, they laugh, they lure you into trust before striking. And most importantly, you'll see how one act of kindness, one moment of courage, can change everything. Keanu knew something was off even before the first blow landed. The city square pulsed with music, drums beating, trumpets echoing, lanterns glowing like stars. The smell of grilled meat and sweet pastries lingered in the air, laughter rising all around. But under the beauty, he felt the shift. Eyes watching him, shadows moving where they shouldn't. This wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. And instincts don't lie. As he made his way through the crowd toward a small cafe where an old friend was waiting with information that could expose powerful names, Keanu's every step tightened with tension. The closer he got, the more his skin prickled, as though unseen eyes had already chosen him. And then, just as the festival's joy reached its loudest, he stepped into a narrow alley. That's when the masks appeared. Painted smiles, exaggerated colors, laughter that hid venom. Performers, or so they seemed. But as their circle tightened, Keanu understood the truth. This wasn't performance. This was a setup. And here's the promise. In this story, you'll discover not only how Keanu fought back, unmasking his attackers one by one, but also the deeper lesson about what it means to see through deception in our own lives. Because sometimes, the most dangerous enemies don't come with weapons. They come with masks. If this intrigues you, don't just watch, join the conversation. Comment right now. Do you believe most people wear masks in daily life? And make sure to subscribe, because what you're about to hear will make you think twice about who you trust. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you trusted someone, only to discover later that they were hiding something behind a smile? That's the trap Keanu walked into that night. The festival looked harmless, innocent even. Families laughed, music carried through the air, and strangers clinked their glasses under the glow of paper lanterns. On the surface, it was joy. But in the shadows, danger was already weaving its net. Keanu wasn't naive. He had felt the weight of betrayal before. He knew how easily people could wear a friendly mask while concealing darker intentions. That's why every step through that crowd felt heavier, his senses tuned to the smallest detail. A reflection in a glass stall, a man pretending to shop but staring too intently, children in masks running past, their laughter slicing through the tension like a knife. Still, nothing could fully prepare him for the moment when those performers revealed their true purpose. They didn't lunge immediately. No, they circled like predators, pretending to juggle, to laugh, to dance. It was all theater, a deadly act with Keanu as the centerpiece. A hand on his shoulder too firm, a smile behind a fox mask too sharp. A dragon mask brushing against his chest just long enough to slip something into his pocket. It's terrifying, isn't it? How easily deception can hide in plain sight. How quickly joy can turn into chaos when trust is betrayed. That's why this story matters. Because it is not just about Keanu being attacked in a crowded alley, it is about recognizing that in our own lives, danger rarely announces itself. It disguises itself. It charms. It wears colors and music. Here's the truth. The night you least expect it, life will test you. You'll be cornered, not always with fists, but with lies, manipulation and setups designed to break you down. And in those moments, your response, your ability to stay clear to see through the masks, will decide whether you fall or rise. That's exactly where Keanu stood as the circle closed. His ribs ached, his breath came heavy, and the world seemed to cheer around him, oblivious to his suffering. But he wasn't broken. Not yet. Because even in the darkest alley, there's always a spark waiting to ignite. And in this case, it came from the unlikeliest of heroes, a boy with nothing but courage and a phone. The grip on Keanu's arms tightened, dragging him to his knees. His palms scraped against rough cobblestones, pain shooting up his leg as a boot slammed into his ribs. Around him, masked faces leaned closer, their painted grins grotesque under the flickering lanterns. From the plaza beyond, laughter and music roared, covering the dull thud of fists and kicks. To the crowd, it was just another performance. But Keanu knew the truth. This was a staged humiliation, carefully designed to destroy him. The fox mask crouched before him, tilting her head as if admiring a piece of art. She dragged her knuckles across his jaw, then snapped a backhand across his face. Blood filled his mouth. Another strike hit his shoulder, forcing him down further. One attacker rifled through his messenger bag, while another shoved a sleek black device into his shirt pocket. "You'll be the headline before sunrise," the Harlequin mask hissed, patting Keanu's chest. It wasn't just an attack, it was a setup. They wanted him bruised, broken, and carrying evidence that would ruin him. And then something shifted. A voice cut through the drums and cheers, sharp and young. "They're hurting him! This isn't part of the show!" The world paused for half a second. At the mouth of the alley stood a boy, no older than 12, his phone raised, its flashlight glaring. His voice cracked, but his courage didn't. "I'm recording this!" he shouted. Two masked figures moved toward him, but the boy stood his ground. His defiance drew the attention of a woman nearby, clutching a bag of groceries. She shoved past a performer, her face hard. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" she yelled, swinging her grocery bag, scattering apples across the stones. The distraction was enough. Keanu twisted, tearing one arm free. Pain seared his shoulder, but freedom surged through him. The crowd began to notice. Murmurs spread, phones lifted, little red recording lights multiplying. The attackers exchanged glances, their perfect cover fracturing. The Harlequin snapped, "Go!" One by one, they retreated, melting into the festival's chaos. But the damage was done. They had been seen. Their masks weren't just painted anymore, they were evidence. And in that moment, Keanu realized something powerful. Sometimes, the strongest blows against darkness don't come from fists, but from ordinary people refusing to stay silent. If you're watching this and believe silence fuels injustice, let me know in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe now because what happens next will shake you even more. Keanu staggered to his feet, ribs screaming, breath ragged, but his eyes locked on the retreating figures. Lanterns swayed above, scattering fragments of light over the cobblestones as the masked attackers vanished into the ocean of dancers and revelers. Their costumes blended perfectly with the festival crowd, but Keanu had caught something. A flash of red silk, the trailing ribbon of the fox mask weaving ahead. That was his target. Ignoring the ache in his body, he pushed forward. His boots pounded against the stones, weaving past drummers, pounding hypnotic rhythms, past couples laughing, past stalls spilling food and drinks as the masked figures shoved through to slow him down. Someone dropped a flaming baton, sending people screaming and scattering. The chaos was the perfect camouflage. But Keanu was relentless. The Harlequin mask glanced back, eyes narrowing as he spotted Keanu closing the distance. With a violent shove, he overturned a vendor's cart, skewers of meat crashing across the street. Keanu vaulted it, slamming into a wall of costumed dancers, but he didn't stop. Every muscle ached, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Behind, security officers were catching on, radios crackling, their voices calling for backup. A sharp command rang out over a megaphone. "Make way!" The crowd parted unevenly, murmurs rising as more phones came out, recording the chase. Keanu's vision tunneled. Only the fox mask mattered. She darted into a narrow lane strung with low lanterns. He followed, heart hammering. But at the turn, two masked figures stepped into his path. One swung a baton, the other a chain glinting in the lantern light. Keanu braced himself, ready to fight despite his injuries. But suddenly, a security officer barreled past, tackling the chain wielder to the ground. Another officer sprayed pepper spray into the Harlequin's face as he tried to intervene, sending him stumbling. The narrow street erupted into chaos, metal clattering, shouts echoing, bodies colliding. Keanu lunged at the baton wielder, seizing his wrist and twisting until the weapon clanged against the ground. The man howled, collapsing to one knee just as another officer cuffed him. Through the smoke of lanterns and torches, Keanu glimpsed the fox mask slipping further ahead, aiming for the south exit. Pain radiated through his ribs, but he didn't hesitate. He wasn't going to stop until every mask was pulled away and the truth stood exposed. The chase spilled back into the main plaza, where music clashed with shouting and the glow of lanterns painted everything in gold and crimson. The fox mask darted toward the south gate, but two uniformed officers were already there, holding the line. She tried to blend in with a group of dancers, her red ribbon fluttering like fire, but one officer's hand shot out, clamping her arm. She twisted violently, hissing curses, but the second officer was already behind her. A metallic snap echoed. The cuffs were on. For the first time that night, Keanu allowed his breath to slow, but only slightly. The fight wasn't over. The captured attackers, Harlequin, Fox, baton wielder, and chain wielder, were marched back into the plaza under harsh lantern light. The crowd, once drunk with celebration, had turned. Phones recorded every second, voices shouted, questions rose like thunder. The air, once sweet with pastries, now tasted of anger and suspicion. The four attackers were forced to kneel by the fountain at the plaza's center, their masks, bright, grotesque, painted to look like joy, were now cracked, smeared with sweat and dust. The Harlequin coughed, still wiping pepper spray from his eyes. The fox mask held her head high, defiant even in defeat, her smirk refusing to fade. And then came the moment no one could ignore. The boy from the alley stood at the front, his phone still clutched in his hand. An officer knelt beside him, whispering quickly. The boy nodded and handed over the device. Seconds later, the video played on a large portable police screen, tilted so the crowd could see. The plaza fell into silence. The footage showed it all. The performers circling Keanu, the sudden blows, the planted device slipped into his pocket. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "They tried to frame him!" Another voice roared, "Arrest them all!" Keanu's eyes never left the fox mask. Even as the truth unfolded for everyone to see, she locked her cold gaze on him, as if promising that this wasn't the end. But the tide had turned. An officer reached into Keanu's pocket, pulling out the sleek black device, holding it high for all to see. "This was planted to incriminate the victim," the officer announced. "Charges include assault, conspiracy, and evidence fabrication." The Harlequin spat on the ground, his composure cracking. The crowd erupted, not in applause but in outrage, their demand for justice rising like a wave. And for the first time all night, Keanu wasn't standing alone. The masks had been exposed. The crowd surged closer, phones raised high, voices echoing through the plaza. Flashes lit the night like lightning, capturing every second of the attackers kneeling in disgrace. Officers tightened their hold, dragging them to their feet, but the fox mask still managed a faint smirk, her painted grin now cracked and chipped, yet defiant. She was sending a message. This isn't over. One by one, the masked figures were marched toward waiting police vans. The crowd parted reluctantly, shouting insults, recording videos, demanding answers. Festival lights bathed the scene in garish reds and golds, transforming the captured performers into twisted caricatures of their own disguises. Keanu followed at a distance, ribs aching with every breath, but his focus sharp. The van's doors slammed shut, locking the attackers away. The plaza buzzed with tension. Justice wasn't celebrated, it was demanded. And yet, in the middle of the noise, a quiet weight settled over Keanu. This wasn't victory. It was only a glimpse of something larger. The boy from the alley reappeared at his side, phone still glowing in his hand. His voice was tentative. "Are you okay, mister?" Keanu gave a small nod, his tone low but firm. "You did more than you know." The boy's shy smile lasted only a moment before he melted back into the sea of onlookers. Then a police sergeant approached holding an evidence bag. Inside was the sleek black device the attackers had planted in Keanu's pocket. "We'll process this," the officer said gravely. "But you should know. This wasn't just about framing you. The device was designed to transmit." Keanu's brow furrowed. "Transmit to where?" "That's the question," the sergeant muttered before walking off, already barking orders into his radio. The festival began to recover around them, music rising again as if nothing had happened. Couples laughed nervously, vendors called out their last sales, fireworks bloomed above. To the crowd, it was an interruption. To Keanu, it was a warning. As he stepped away from the plaza into a quieter street, his phone buzzed. No name, just a message. This was only a warning. Keanu stopped cold, his shadow stretching long under the dim street lamps. The night was silent except for distant drums. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his jaw tightening. The game hadn't ended. It had only just begun. Keanu stood beneath the dim streetlights, bruised but unbroken, his breath slow, his ribs aching with every inhale. Around him, the paper lanterns still swayed gently in the breeze, casting their soft glow as if mocking the violence that had just unfolded. To anyone else, the festival still looked alive, joyful, but to Keanu, every flicker of light now carried a darker reminder. The world doesn't always strike with open fists. Sometimes it smiles first. Sometimes it hides behind painted faces, blending into the crowd until it's too late. That was the real danger of masks. Not the painted ones, but the invisible ones people wear every day. The friend who hides betrayal behind a kind word. The colleague who smiles while plotting your downfall. The stranger who looks harmless, yet carries poison behind their charm. The festival had shown him that danger doesn't always scream. It whispers, it dances, it deceives. Yet amidst the deception there had been courage. A boy no older than 12 who refused to stay silent. A woman with nothing but a grocery bag who stepped into the fire. Their voices, their choices, had pierced the illusion. And that was the moment Keanu realized. Masks may be powerful, but truth only needs one voice to break through. So let me ask you, if you saw someone cornered, humiliated, or falsely accused, would you step in? Would you raise your voice, even if it meant standing against a crowd? Tell me in the comments right now, because silence feeds injustice. But courage, even small, imperfect courage, can turn the tide. And if this truth resonates with you, don't just listen. Subscribe now. Not for me, but for you. Because if this story touched something inside you, it means you're ready to see through the masks around you. And together, we'll keep unmasking them. The night's chaos began to fade into the distance, but Keanu's mind stayed sharp, replaying every detail. The fox mask's smirk, the device slipped into his pocket, the message on his phone. This was only a warning. None of it felt random. Someone had orchestrated this with precision, and the performers were just pawns in a much larger game. He walked through the quiet streets, lantern light giving way to the yellow glow of old lamps. His shirt was torn, knuckles raw, ribs bruised, but he kept moving. Pain was nothing compared to the weight of what he'd just uncovered. Whoever had sent those masked attackers wasn't finished, and if this was only the opening move, the real danger was still waiting. But Keanu wasn't a man who backed away. If anything, pain sharpened him. Every bruise was a reminder that masks might hide faces, but they can't hide intent forever, and when the truth is exposed, it burns brighter than any lantern. As he reached a quieter square, he stopped. The boy's voice echoed in his memory. "This isn't a part of the show." That courage had saved him. It was proof that even in a world of deception, light can come from the unlikeliest places. Keanu looked up at the dark sky streaked with fireworks. To most, they were just colors celebrating another festival. To him, they were sparks against the darkness, reminders that even small bursts of truth can break through overwhelming night. The world thrives on illusions. But the moment someone dares to say, "This isn't right," the mask cracks. And once it cracks, it can never fully hide again. Pain radiated through Keanu's body, but he refused to let it anchor him in despair. Instead, he saw it as a reminder, a physical echo of the truth he had uncovered. The bruises would heal, the cuts would fade, but the lesson carved into him that night would remain. The attackers hadn't wanted his life. Not yet. They had wanted his reputation, his credibility, his very name. By planting that device, they had tried to make him the villain in someone else's story. And isn't that what happens to so many of us? Lies get planted, rumors whispered, false evidence built until suddenly, you're carrying a burden you never asked for. But Keanu's resolve only hardened. Because the world doesn't define you by what others plant on you. It defines you by how you respond. He had fought, endured, and unmasked. And now he carried not just scars, but clarity. He thought again about the boy who had stood at the alley's mouth. That boy hadn't waited for courage to arrive. He acted in fear, and that made him powerful. That's what people often forget. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall despite fear. And that night, one boy had reminded Keanu and all of us that the loudest weapon against injustice is a voice that refuses to be silenced. So when you feel cornered, when lies weigh heavy on you, remember this: you are not powerless. You can rise. You can unmask. And no matter how elaborate the disguise, truth will always find a way to shine. The police vans rumbled away into the night, their red and blue lights fading against the horizon. The festival's music swelled once more, couples dancing, children laughing, lanterns glowing. To the world, it seemed as though nothing had happened. But Keanu knew better. The shadows had only retreated, not disappeared. He stood in the quiet street, phone heavy in his pocket. That message, this was only a warning, was a promise that tonight was just the beginning. Whoever was behind this hadn't shown their face yet. They had sent pawns, masks, illusions. But the real players were still hidden in the dark, watching. Keanu inhaled slowly, ignoring the sting in his ribs. He wasn't afraid. If anything, he was more prepared than ever. Because the night had proven one thing: truth always finds its defenders. Sometimes they're strangers in a crowd. Sometimes they're children with shaky voices. Sometimes they're ordinary people holding grocery bags. But together, they turn silence into resistance. He thought of the fox mask's eyes, cold and calculating even in handcuffs. She had wanted him broken, but she had failed. And failure for people like her meant desperation, and desperation made them reckless. That's when the truth slips out, when the masks crack the fastest. So he kept walking, his shadow stretching across the stones, not as a symbol of weakness, but as proof that even in the darkest night, light always follows. The festival's echoes faded behind him as Keanu moved deeper into the silent streets. The lanterns, now distant, looked hollow, like fragile shells, beautiful on the outside, empty within. And wasn't that the perfect metaphor for the night? Smiles painted on masks, laughter covering betrayal, beauty disguising corruption. But Keanu had seen through it. He had endured, and now he was ready. His phone buzzed again, though no new message appeared. It was just the vibration of an empty battery. Still, the weight of that last warning lingered. He replayed it in his mind. This was only a warning. That meant whoever orchestrated this attack wanted him alive, for now. But alive didn't mean safe. It meant the game had rules, and he had just been invited to play. He paused under a lone street lamp, its glow stretching his shadow long. Tonight had proven something he already suspected. Enemies don't always strike with daggers. Sometimes they use deception, humiliation, and lies. But it had also revealed something far stronger. Allies appear in the most unexpected places. A boy, a stranger, a crowd that finally chose to see. Keanu drew in a breath, the ache in his ribs sharp but grounding. He wasn't walking away from this fight. He was walking into it, with clarity, with resilience, with the certainty that no mask, no matter how elaborate, could hide forever. And that's where the story leaves us tonight, not with an ending, but with a beginning. Because the shadows haven't given up, and neither has Keanu. The night had begun with celebration, but it ended with revelation. Keanu had walked into a festival of masks and left with bruises and scars. The world's most dangerous weapons aren't always fists or knives. Sometimes they're lies disguised as smiles, traps hidden beneath painted joy. But just as masks can deceive, they can also be torn away. And that's what matters most. Because no matter how carefully someone hides, no matter how many disguises they wear, the truth doesn't vanish. It waits. It burns quietly until a single spark, a boy's shout, a woman's defiance, a camera raised, ignites it for all to see. That night, courage wasn't found in strength alone. It was found in voices refusing to be silent. So here's the question for you. In a world full of masks, will you be the one to see through them? Will you be the voice in the alley who dares to say, "This isn't right"? If your answer is yes, let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them, and I want to hear from those who refuse to let silence win.